That also means that we are very, very close to a new legislative session beginning in the state of Mississippi. And we are happy to welcome Angela Burks Hill this morning, Senator from District 40, to the program. I was going back and reading some, and it's almost a year ago, January 17th of last year, when Senator Burks Hill, you said to Paul Gallo that maybe you're too conservative for the Education Committee. The work continues, though, as we roll toward the start of a new session. Thanks for being with us. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and I'm glad to be with you. And it's kind of ironic that you started off the program by saying that. And, I just read an article from the Magnolia Tribune a couple of days ago that talks about the new education funding formula and how that MDE is telling the legislature, or telling certain members of the legislature, that we need to remove the cap off of the ad valorem taxes that school districts can charge people for their property tax due to this new formula. So, I was very concerned about this new formula. It was very, highly touted and pushed. And when I started looking at it and started making some really quick calculations, I'm like, this does not add up. And so I was one of, I think, 3 people in the Senate that voted no on this formula. And now I'm, in hindsight, I'm thinking, I was right.
And so if the cap is removed, does that remove the requirement that counties would have to do bond referendum issues to raise rates, or would that give counties the ability to do that without taking it to a vote locally?
The counties can do their bonds outside of that. But what we're talking about is, school districts typically the cap is 55 mills, and there's several school districts who are at the cap already. And there's certain reasons that they can go above that cap. But the Department of Education is basically saying that we need to just take the cap off, because in order for the extra cost that it's going to cost some of the school districts under the new formula, that they need the cap removed. So it's actually going to cost people more, certain school districts more, in ad valorem property taxes to comply with the new formula. And I never want to see people have to raise property taxes or get their property taxes raised based on something that the state of Mississippi has done. Yeah. Typically, ad valorem taxes are totally left to the locals, to the counties, the cities, and the school districts. And now we're being told, well, the 55 mil cap that the legislature has put, it's been in place for years and years, needs to be removed, so there needs to be no cap on ad valorem millage that the schools can charge. So that's going to create a problem, in my opinion.
It's interesting that this is what we're talking about, because what I've kind of coined the off season, right? The time between when you guys closed out at the end of April and when you start back in January being the off season, a lot of conversation has been out there that, hey, this 2025 session is going to lead, we're going to see a lot of conversation about school choice and kind of where that goes. In your mind, does all of that tie together? Because to me, when you get to the school choice conversation, to me, a lot of that is, okay, well, where does the money go? Does money follow students if they go to different districts? Does money stay within districts? Is there a cap to how many students can move to another district? Is all of this intertwined?
Well, it is to a degree, but just to be honest, I'm not a fan of a person's ad valorem taxes in their local jurisdiction subsidizing students from another jurisdiction that may not have the ad valorem taxes or pay the large amount of taxes that a certain district pays. But what I am a fan of is a tax credit for a parent choosing what education that their best fits their child. So, this transferring with from one district to another, school districts right now do allow that in certain circumstances. But the only way that they could really recoup that ad valorem tax base that the locals pay would be through charging tuition to another student that is coming into a public school from another public school. That would kind of offset that. But, I think tax credits would leave the Department of Education out of it. I think, we've seen how the special needs scholarship and things like that have kind of been sabotaged, in my opinion, through the Department of Education. And, then it's been blamed on the partakers of the scholarships, that they're the problem because some have not complied. Well, you have to have a person who is a good watchdog and a good administrator to keep the any kind of misuse from happening. But my thoughts are a tax credit through the Department of Revenue would be much better for someone who is maybe homeschooling their child or sending their child to some school other than a public school, because right now any person that has a child that's school age that does not send their child to a public school is automatically saving the state of Mississippi about $7,000 in student based formula,
right?
The base student cost. So, and that's a lot of money that the state's not paying because of the people who are sending their kids to private school or who are homeschooling their kids. That's a huge savings to the state. So, you have to think of it in those terms as well. Yeah.
It's certainly is a complicated issue, and it seems to be one where there are pretty strong opinions. I've talked to school board members in a number of different districts, and while politically it feels like there's a lot of momentum for school choice and, hey, this is the route we go, I'm sure in your role as a teacher and with the people you've talked to as well, there are a lot of unanswered questions and fears of unintended consequences. Maybe that's the best way to put it if we push through this or push forward with this. Do you hear that? Do you see that?
Well, I don't really know any superintendents that support it. But, I'm looking at what the broad base of the people in the state of Mississippi support. And I think they do support school choice, but I think that you're right, that there's a lot of moving parts, and you have to think it through. You don't want it to be just like this school funding formula. You pass it, and then 6 or 9 months later, the State Department of Education is coming back and telling you some of these things that are in this bill that, of course, weren't discussed at the podium. And I couldn't get my questions. Answered. And I did a few little quick calculations for like a small school. I just picked one small school, and I did a quick calculation of how much that school district would be getting under that funding formula like 10 years down the road. It was an astronomical, unsustainable amount of money. I'm like, there's no way that with PERS hanging in the balance and, the other moving parts, talking about Medicaid expansion, like there's no way to afford all this. You just can't. I mean, where's the money going to come from? I don't want to tax people more. And I just didn't see the numbers adding up. I was a student of real math, not Common Core math. I was a chemistry teacher. I was a biology teacher. I went through 3 semesters of calculus in college, and my little quick calculation said this doesn't add up.
Were you able to use the calculator on your iPhone for that, or did you have to go to the old TI-61?
All I did, I used a simple calculator on my telephone.
There you go.
On my iPhone.
Yeah. Not advanced math at all. Visiting with Angela Burks Hill, Senator District 40. She is the chair of the Senate Constitution Committee, vice chair of the Drug Policy Committee as well. I guess I'll ask you this now. Have you got time to hang through the break to spend a few more minutes with us? Okay.
Yeah.
We got about a minute and a half left until the break. Senate Constitution Committee. I'm not going to lie to you. On the surface, it sounds boring to me, but then when I dig a little bit deeper, I'm like, okay, you put these bills together, and then you go, yeah, but does this jive with what our laws say in Mississippi before we put it into action? Pretty significant stuff that has to happen there, right?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. I don't know. It was one of those things where it's like that feels heavy, but is this committee kind of the final, you have to stamp it and say this goes along, or are you looking at bills earlier in the process?
Well, basically, changing the Constitution is a big thing. And the few changes that we've seen in the Constitution in the past, like voter ID, we could have, that could have been done in other ways. To require voter ID, especially with a supermajority in the legislature that we have now. So, it's going to take a lot to convince me that our Constitution needs further change. Mississippi has pretty good voter laws right now. We can do a little bit more on tightening up absentee ballots, and you saw that.
Sure.
That's going to happen because of the court ruling that we don't need to keep having ballots tricked.
Quick time out.
Basically.
We got to run to break. We'll be back right after this. Angela Burks Hill, Senator, Mississippi District 40, joining us on this Monday morning, the 30th of December, on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Thanks for being with us on this Monday morning, December 30th. Almost to the flip of the calendar. Angela Burks Hill, Mississippi Senator, District 40, on with us this morning. And Senator Burks Hill, we appreciate a few more minutes of your time as we wrap things up here in the 7 o'clock hour. So school choice we know is going to be a big conversation. Tax reform we know is going to be a big conversation. Medicaid expansion is going to be a big conversation. I say conversation. I feel like that's a good word to use. I was talking before you came on about already some signs we're seeing in Washington. Republicans are fighting amongst themselves. And it looks like stuff that should be smooth sailing may not be the case at all. What's it going to look like this legislative session in Jackson? Not so much in terms of Republicans within the Senate, Republicans within the House, but maybe a little bit of drama between the Senate and the House, who doesn't always see things eye to eye.
Well, unfortunately, that's been the case for quite a while.
Yeah.
And you would think that, Republican leadership could sit down in a room and, pick an agenda like the Democrats do in Washington, D.C., and then just drive it through like a freight train. But that never seems to happen because, unfortunately, we have too many people that are on board with Democrat agendas rather than Republican agendas, and that's where that's where your breakdown comes from, because there's a lot of people who just aren't going to vote for some of these things that aren't on the top of the list of Republican voters, including me. There's just certain things I'm not going to vote for. I'm not going to vote for able-bodied people to get on Medicaid and take the resources away from, the needy people that are maybe mentally or physically handicapped that are waiting for a Medicaid waiver through the Department of Mental Health or something like this. There's already people waiting for services that are on Medicaid now that are in the truly vulnerable category. And so, why compete for money and services and to compete for providers by adding able-bodied people, childless people onto the Medicaid rolls? It's just something that...
Is that even if there's the work requirement there?
The work requirement, that doesn't make any difference for me, okay? Because, frankly, I think the people are tired. I think you saw in this last presidential election, people are tired of redistribution and moving wealth from people who are paying taxes, to other segments of the society to pay for more entitlement programs. I think people are just at the breaking point on expanding entitlements. That's the feel that I get in my district when I talk to people.
Genuinely curious about this, because one of the arguments that you hear is, but we're already paying for this. We're just paying for it for people in other states. Why shouldn't it benefit the people in Mississippi as well?
Well, what I just told you is we don't have enough providers in the state that are willing to take Medicaid as already, because the reimbursement rates for Medicaid, especially for physicians, are subpar. They don't make enough money to break even on just general physician payments from Medicaid. So that's why you have fewer and fewer doctors taking Medicaid, because they just can't make ends meet off Medicaid. And, the hospitals make a little money off Medicaid, but the actual physicians are the ones who are struggling and having to try to treat so many patients in one day to try to break even because they have so many Medicaid patients. And it's just not a good payer mix. Plus, you would run the people off the exchange who are actually, the exchange provides a better payer rate than what Medicaid does. So you actually are going to screw the payer mix up when you run all the people that are on the exchange now onto Medicaid. So it's, there's a lot of moving parts to this as well.
Yeah.
The exchange pays better than Medicaid. You don't want those people moved off the exchange into Medicaid so that the payer mix is lower. So, there's a lot of things to consider. And getting back to
I applaud you, by the way, for explaining that in a way that I haven't necessarily heard that explained. So I do appreciate the clarification, at least from your perspective on that. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have enough doctors in the state as it is. And we also have needy people that are competing for Medicaid dollars right now. We have people who are mentally handicapped that are on waiting lists for programs that they need because they can't take care of themselves. I don't want able-bodied people that can take care of themselves. There's a lot of work out there. Mississippi, I think, was third in GDP growth for every state in the country. I think that we were fourth in income growth. There's work out there, okay? People just need to go and get a job. The workforce participation rate in Mississippi is the problem. The problem is not Medicaid expansion. The problem is people aren't working. They're figuring out another way to get by without working. And so, I don't think that somebody that's 59 years old that worked all their life and is paying their taxes should subsidize, whether it's federally or state, should subsidize a 25-year-old healthy person's insurance through Medicaid. It's just that simple.
That is hard to disagree with. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Senator Angela Burks Hill, District 40, Picayune, and other parts of the southern part of the state of Mississippi. Thanks so much for your time this morning. Happy New Year to you, and look forward to visiting with you in the coming weeks.
Thank you for having me. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Hope your Christmas is great.
It was wonderful. Thank you. Same to you. This is the Gallo Show.